When Mega Evolutions was first announced, most people were very excited for the cards such as Mega Venusaur EX and Mega Lucario EX, but most of the others were kind of written off as bulk cards, and I can't blame you. If we take a look at Mega Absol EX, it is a basic EX with 280 HP. It is an attack that, if your opponent's active Pokemon has exactly 6 damage counters on it, it is knocked out. And look, that's fine, however, it is very specific and not the easiest thing to pull off. And the second attack, Claw of Darkness, is a attack that we have seen before on a Standler card, except that attack did 20 damage, and then your opponent would reveal their hand and discard a card you find there. So the card isn't anything special. With 2 retreat cost and 280 HP, it doesn't really have the stats to, back up a 3 prize Pokemon. And if we take a look at a card such as Mega Kangaskhan EX, don't get me wrong, this card is quite cool. It has a great ability. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in an active spot, you may use this ability and draw 2 cards. However, you can't use more than one of these abilities per turn. And then it has an attack for 3 colors energy, doing 200 damage, and then you flip a coin until you get tails, and for every heads, you do 50 more damage. And this card is definitely, I'd say, better than the Mega Absol. However, when we take a look at cards like Mega Lucario EX, 340 HP, Aura Jab, 130 damage, and then you can attach up to 3 basic fighting Pokemon from your discard pile in any way you like, and then Mega Brave, 270 damage, and during your next turn, it can't use Mega Brave, and then you pair this with cards like Premium Power Pro, and the new Hariyama, I think. It's pretty decent, right? And then we take a look at Mega Venusaur EX, which has 380 HP, a full 100 more than the Absol, has a great ability which you can move your grass energy around as often as you like, and then 240 damage. And when you pair this with the Meganium, which says each grass energy counts as 2 grass energy instead of just 1, you'd be thinking that these are the cards that will have some form of success. You won't really be looking at Mega Absol and Mega Kangaskhan. Well, recently we had the first tournament in the Mega Evolutions format, and we can take a look at the top 8 over here, and what do we notice? We see 3 separate Mega Absol and Mega Kangaskhan decks. So this deck was kind of created by Tord Reklev. We see he got top 8 with his creation, and let's take a look at the deck quickly. So the deck itself is really interesting. I think there's a lot to take away from this deck, and it has a lot of really cool things you can do with this list. So we start off with 3 Monkey Dory, and we'll get to that momentarily. Here are the things. We have 2 Mega Absol and 2 Mega Kangaskhan. So these are the main guys of the deck. And then we also have 2 Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon. The Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon is really good for the Goldengo matchup, because Goldengo obviously has an ability, and Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon prevents Pokemon with abilities from attacking through it. Then we also have 2 Yveltal. And here is something that is quite cool about this Yveltal. Clutch. 1 Dark Energy, 20 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, that Pokemon can't retreat, which is super nice for slowing down the game and just dealing a little bit of damage. However, the 20 damage is not the main interest here. The dark typing is, because if we read what Pekarant does, it says once during your turn you may switch a dark benched Pokemon with your active Pokemon. If you do, that new dark Pokemon is poisoned. And you might be thinking, all right, but what's good about that? It poisons your own card. But each turn you'll be dealing 10 damage to yourself by trapping something in the active position. Each turn you take 10 damage. During your opponent's turn, when it comes back to you, you'll take another 10 damage. So basically, each one of your turns, you'll have 20 damage on your Yveltal, which can be moved around with the Monkey Dories, which is really, really strong. Against decks that don't play their own Monkey Dories, this damage will stick. And for attacks such as Rapid Fire Combo, which is 200 damage, and attacks like Claw of Darkness, which does 200 damage, a lot of like EX Pokemon you can see have 210 HP. For example, the most common one would be Pheasantipity over here. It has 210 HP. And this is super important because now we can KO stuff like this Pheasantipity with this Rapid Fire Combo. And we can continuously do this by trapping something inactive and just moving as much damage as we want. But not only that, it is also really nice for lining up an attack like our Terminal Period. Right, Terminal Period, if your opponent's active Pokemon has exactly 6 damage counters, that Pokemon is knocked out. So now we have an answer to actually get those exact 6 damage counters on it, which is our Monkey Dory. And we can set these Monkey Dories up quite easily with the help of Technical Machine Turbo Energize. which is search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards and attach them to your bench Pokemon in any way you like. So something that you can do with this deck is you can force up a Mega Kangaskhan into the active position in the beginning of the game. This Pokemon has 300 HP, so not many decks can just deal with this off the rip. And if you plus the Lively Stadium, that's another 30 HP, and if you plus the Bravery Charm, that's another 50 HP. Now we're looking at 380 HP on a basic Pokemon that is drawing you 2 cards every turn. And then we can attach an energy to it. We can attach our Turbo Energize, and then we can energize up maybe double Monkey Dory, or we can energize up for a Monkey Dory plus a Mega Absol, and then on the following turn, we'll be able to, maybe use Energy Switch to get that energy off of the Mega Kangaskhan. We can penny up the Kangaskhan, and then attach the Absol, and we can start swinging with Claw of Darkness from as early as turn 2. And this is, well, really, really strong, because Claw of Darkness also lets you discard a card from your opponent's hand, which is really nice for against decks that are trying to set up. Like, we take decks like Gardevoir, we take decks like Dragapult. Those decks love to hold on to their resources in their hand while they're trying to set up. And now you can kind of see that it's pretty good, because your opponent reveals their hand and you discard a card you find there. So if your opponent's holding on to their Neo Upper Ace spec, you can just get rid of it, right? Very, very strong attack there indeed. And it's also doing 200 damage. That's not a bad number to hit. Like we said with the Monkey Dories, that number can get higher. And this deck synergizes weirdly really well. You might be thinking the Dragapult matchup might not be great, but you have your Psyduck to stop the Dusk Noirs popping, and with Dusk Noir, Dragapult being the most common version of the deck, then yeah, that kind of helps out a lot. And on top of that, when they go Phantom Dive, they deal 200 damage to something in the active. You can move 60 of that damage back, use Terminal Period to energy straight away, and just knock out their Dragapult, which they took like 3 or 4 turns establishing, whereas you're able to do that in just 1 turn. So this deck has a lot of options and a lot of really strong possibilities. For example, there's not a lot of decks that can just deal with 300 HP basic Pokemon swinging for at least 200 damage each turn. And not only that, while you're swinging with this 380 HP Pokemon, you can be powering up another one on the bench, and while this one is close to dying, you can just penny it back up, put it back into your hand, and well, there you go. You've got yourself a brand new, fresh 350 HP Pokemon that is ready to go again. So you have your draw engine and pretty consistent attacker, you have your more niche attacker, but also your Guardy killer, which is very important, and also your Dragapult killer. And then you have your answer to things like Charizard, things like Goldengo, and then you also have your Yveltal, which is able to slow down the game and be able to actually spread this damage. Then we have Blood Moon Ursaluna, which is just a great closer, which can attack for very cheap. But with things like Energy Switch, obviously you can attack with this a little bit faster. And also, it is a basic Pokemon. All of these Pokemon are basic Pokemon, so Bravery Charm is a great card, and so is Lively Stadium as a Stadium Bump, because now each of these can basically get a plus 80 HP boost. So if we think Ursaluna, this can basically go up to 340 HP, which is very strong. And almost all of these Pokemon can attack. The only cards that don't really attack are the Psyduck, Tatsugiri, and Latias can't attack. That's the only one that like literally cannot attack because of the Eon Blade cost being 2 Psychic, and you don't really play any Psychic. And the Peckrunt in itself is actually a really good attacker, and we saw something this weekend. We saw it attack very often actually, because it does 60 damage for each prize card your opponent's taken. So if they've taken 3 prize cards, it's doing 180 damage, and for 2 energy, that's one-shotting things like a Gardevoir EX. That is very, very strong. And not only that, it's also a great closer. It can be dealing 300 damage at the end of the game if your opponent's taken 5 prize cards, which is the highest damage output out of anything in your deck other than a Mega Kangaskhan flipping more than 2 heads. Miss Energy is another great card because that stops your Psyduck from taking any damage from Phantom Dive, which is really nice, and it also stops stuff like your maybe Latias getting trapped by opposing clutches, right? It's pretty nice. However, you being trapped is not really a problem when you are playing 3 Penny and also a Peckrunt, right? So trapping is probably not your like biggest concern, which is definitely nice. You know, we have seen an emergence of these trap cards, such as the Maractus, such as the Sudowoodo recently, and now the Yveltal itself. But the Miss Energy is also really good for something like the Mirror Match. If we take, for example, you have a Mega Kangaskhan that you've powered up for 3 energy, and one of them is a Mist Energy, what is one thing that you do not want to do? Well, if you do 200 damage to an opposing Kangaskhan, and your opponent moves 60 damage with 2 Monkey Dories onto your Kangaskhan, and they use Terminal Period, well, that would suck, because they've just used, well, your damage against you, and knocked out your Kangaskhan for 3 prize cards very easily. So you can prevent that with Mist Energy, because now Terminal Period doesn't work because that's an effect of an attack, and Mist prevents effects of attacks. So very nice there. However, you might be thinking, well, 2 cards as a draw engine isn't great. And look, don't get me wrong, it's not bad, right? Two cards per turn is nice. Sometimes it'll find you what you want, but that is also why this deck is playing the Tatsugiri. So Tatsugiri is kind of like a portable Pokegear, and while you're under item lock, you can't use Pokegear, but you can use Tatsugiri, which is super nice. So while it's an active spot, you can look at the top 6 cards of your deck, and then you can grab a supporter you find there. And obviously you play quite a good amount of supporters. You play 4 Arven, 3 Lilies, 3 Boss's Orders, 3 Penny, and 2 Iono. So your supporters are definitely higher in that amount, which is super nice, because now when you are using attract customers, there's a good chance you're actually going to hit something that you do want, because your least number of supporter is Iono, and Iono is a bit more of a niche supporter towards the end of the game. In the beginning of the game, you definitely want to find your Arven to get your Precious Trolley set up, because that can help you instantly get your entire board state out. You can get whatever Pokemon you want. You can get your double or triple Monkey Dory, you can get your Absol, you can get your Kangaskhan, you can get your Ogerpon, you can get your Pheasantipity if you want, you can also get your Psyduck. It's just so nice. You can get any of your Pokemon because it says put any amount of basic Pokemon on your bench, and well, all your Pokemon being basic Pokemon, you can get them out straight away. So a great ace spec to include in this deck. Then you have 3 Lilies Determination, which is probably just the best draw supporter in the game right now, being able to draw up to 8 cards in the beginning of the game and 6 during any other point in the game. Then you have 3 Boss's Orders and also 2 Countercatcher. The 2 Countercatcher is really nice because Pokegear essentially, at the later stages of the game, if you are behind, if you use Pokegear and it finds you Arven or Boss's Orders, this is basically the same thing, because now you can go Arven for your Countercatcher and be able to use Countercatcher as your Gust instead of the Boss's Orders, and you can also get yourself a Bravery Charm. So sometimes the Arven is actually better than the Boss's Orders, because not only can it find you the Gust, it can also find you a tool, which is also just really nice. Yeah, well, that's basically the entire deck. It is definitely, I love the synergy between all the cards. Also, don't get me wrong, Rapid Fire Combo, it does some crazy things. I wasn't playing this exact deck, but I was playing Mega Kangaskhan on ladder yesterday, and well, I flipped 6 heads against a Dragapult and one-shot it. Next turn, I flipped 5 heads against another Dragapult and one-shot it, right? So there's always that chance where you can kind of just gamble your way into a victory. We saw that happen on stream yesterday when a Gardevoir player actually copied Mega Kangaskhan's own attack Rapid Fire Combo and flip double heads to knock it out and win the game. So the deck is also just very fun. That's something else that's very important. It is just very, very fun. Moving forward, I think this deck is going to be fine. I think this deck is going to be pretty good. However, we'll definitely probably see it change up a little bit, because obviously the gimmick is out now. The cat's out of the bag. People understand the deck and know how it plays and know how to play against it as well. And we'll probably be seeing it around a bit more, but it's going to be more of, this is probably the new Terra Box version. You know, this is like the new box. You've got a bunch of decent, strong attackers that can do pretty cool things, and you've got a decent engine as well. And yeah, I think moving forward, the deck will be fine, but we'll probably be seeing different versions of the list. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed, smash like, smash subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'll see you guys around soon.